Maamar today in Mitzvah Shem. We're on page 286, towards the bottom of the page. And the Rebbe, 286. The Rebbe in the Maamar is explaining the pasuk in Parshas B'chukoisai, which says, "Im b'chukoisai telechu, v'es mitzvayis adishmeru, v'asisem oisam, v'nasati gishmechem be'itam." So he spent a lot of time explaining the idea of chukim. One meaning chukim are statutes, mitzvahs that have no explanation, they transcend rationale. The other idea of chukah, it means the idea of engraving, that it becomes part of you. He spoke about the idea of guarding the mitzvahs. Why do you need guarding? Because the idea of guarding the mitzvahs refers to excitement in doing mitzvahs. Or his Hebrew word he used was cheshek. Cheshek in Torah, real desire and delight in doing a mitzvah. We say, parenthetically, we say every day in davening in the Avas Olam, right before Shema, we say, illuminate our eyes with your Torah, v'dabik libeinu, and make our hearts cleave, dveikus, dabik, b'mitzvah with your mitzvahs. And the third thing we say is, v'yached livaveinu, and make our hearts be united, to love your name. Right? Those are three things. Ho'er, dabek, and yached. There's a Maamar of the previous Rebbe. We might have learned it once, but probably it's good to relearn it at some point. And basically, we talk about being illuminated b'seider sechel. So the basic question is, what's the Chasidus? The Chasidus is that the Torah should illuminate us. Not our interpretations of the Torah should illuminate us. We come up with a Chasidus, and that's what excites us. Just, rather, that's not where it's at. Rather, we're asking that the Torah should illuminate us, and that's why it says v'ho'er. V'ho'er means you should see, it should be illuminated. Only when you're guided by the Torah of God do you have such illumination. Number two, the dabik lebeinu b'mitzvah secha. How do you attain dveikus? Through mitzvah secha, through God's commandments. If we look at commandments as our own thing, then it's not dveikus. What is it? It's again our own trip. So that's what we say. V'dabek libeinu b'mitzvah secha. And finally, v'yachet. If you want to create yichud, unity, it needs to be la'ava shemecha, to love your name. In other words, again, it should be HaKadosh Baruch Hu's name. That's the emphasis. So I'm mentioning all these three things, in the context of Tishmeru. It's mitzvahsai Tishmeru, that you shall guard the mitzvahs, and the Rebbe teaches here that it means you should have a geschmack, a cheshek in Torah. How do you get a cheshek in Torah? When you don't put in your own cheshek, your own interpretations and thrills and all of that, but rather you focus on what the Torah says. Okay, and the third thing that he says is, it says, V'asisem oisam. V'asisem oisam, you shall do them. And he asked the question, well, of course you should do the mitzvahs. What's the V'asisem oisam? So he spoke about the idea of simcha shel mitzvah. Okay, I don't know if you got this point yesterday, but the nekuda of V'asisem oisam, you shall do them, refers specifically to having simcha shel mitzvah while you perform the mitzvahs. And if you're lacking simcha shel mitzvah, you're not really vasisem oisam. You're doing the mitzvah in a robotic way, in a mechanical way, but you're not making the mitzvah. How do you make the mitzvah? How do you make the mitzvah if you have simcha shel mitzvah? That's the third point. Then we learned yesterday about this idea of v'nosati geshmeichem itam. Now, v'nosati is, the first three things refers to our activity. Torah, mitzvah, simcha shel mitzvah. The result, when we do those three things appropriately, will be that we will receive rain, geshmeichem, in at the appropriate time. And the Rebbe speaks about this idea the receiving the rain is getting a special bracha from on high, and he says this refers to the Pnimius HaTorah, that there is the Galia, the revealed part of Torah, the Talmud, the Halacha, etc., the Gemara, the Halacha. That's the revealed part. That's the Mayim Tachtoinim, that's the lower waters, and then there's the Mayim Elyonim, the upper waters, which refers to Pnimius HaTorah, the inner aspect of Torah. Which, by the way, Pnimius HaTorah, the way Chabad understands it, is a reference, of course, to all of Kabbalah, but as expressed through Chasidus, Torah Baal Shem Tov. In other words, someone might say to you, okay, I'm going to learn Pnimius HaTorah, I'm going to learn Zohar, I'm going to learn Kisvei Arizal. Is that Pnimius HaTorah? Absolutely. Is that the Pnimius HaTorah that the Chabad Rabbeim, as a continuation of the Baal Shem Tov, meant with Pnimius HaTorah? No. The Alter Rebbe inserted in Tanya many Kabbalistic ideas, but through the filter of the Chabad system of Chochmah Bina Das. So if someone asks you, Avi, are you learning Kabbalah? And if you're not learning Kabbalah, but you're only learning Chasidus, the answer is no, I'm not learning Kabbalah, I'm learning Chasidus. Isn't one of the big questions when I was a teenager, in the yeshiva world was, isn't Chasidus Kabbalah? Eser Sfiros, Atzilis, Oilamos. The answer is, Chasidus employs verbiage and concepts of Kabbalah, but it's not Kabbalah. What's the difference? The difference is it's a two-way street. One is going from above to below, one is going from below to above. Another way to say that is, Kabbalah undresses God, and Chassidus dresses up Hashem. In other words, Chassidus takes Hashem and gives and shows how man, through his body parts and everything else that man is made up, is really an extension of these Kabbalistic ideas. So the emphasis in Chasidus is what we call hislapshus, from the word levush, to dress up. What I'm telling you now is a very fundamental teaching. Whereas Kabbalah is about hispashtus. What does hispashtus mean? Lahafshit, to strip, to undress, to remove the clothing. Lahafshit. We have the human being who is so physical. We then undress the physicality and we assert certain sfirot and Kabbalistic ideas. So, the emphasis there is to remove the garment. So the focus is on the esoteric. In Chasidus, the focus is...
I love that quote.
I'm sorry?
I love that quote. Kabbalah undresses Hashem and Chasidut dresses him.
That's right. You heard it from Chaim Dalfin on Beis Tammuz Tafshin Pei. It's my original quote. Okay, anyway. And Chasidus is just the opposite. The Avodah, the whole... and again, I don't mean only Chabad. I mean Torah Baal Shem Tov, with the emphasis of Chabad, is in the halbosha, in la halbish, to dress up. Now, why am I saying this here? Because the Rebbe says here in the Maamar, what we learned yesterday is that the V'nosati Gishmeichem, Hashem will bless us with rain. And he interprets here, Moshe, in the Maamar, that this rain refers to the Pnimius HaTorah. We will get an inspiration from Pnimius. So when you're learning the Gemara, whatever the section of the Gemara is, all of a sudden you won't sense anymore the cow goring the cow and what the law is 50%, 100%, which is all halach and all true and all Hashem's Torah. But you'll sense in that a higher divinity as well. Or you'll feel that that's really what's going on. Which, by the way, this was one of the big criticisms just for a moment, historically, just for your information. In 1941, when the previous Rebbe had a journal called Hakriya Vakdusha be printed from 41 to 45, and in this journal, the objective was to rebuild the faith that Yidden should have in Hashem. So even though there was a Holocaust, don't lose your faith. That was the overall objective. Part of that objective was to introduce Chasidus to people that didn't learn Chasidus. And the language at the time, by most Yidden in the New York area and Philadelphia and in Boston and Chicago, was Yiddish. That generation. So everything was written in Yiddish, pretty much. Yiddish, Hebrew. And the Rebbe hired a writer who lived in New Haven, Connecticut. And this writer had been an editor at a Yiddish newspaper that went bankrupt in the 1920s, which, by the way, Cantor Yossele Rosenblatt was involved with. I wrote about this in one of my books, The History, and he put in a lot of his own money, and he was misled. It's a very interesting piece of history, and most people don't even know. and he lost his pants. And that's why Yossele Rosenblatt came to Eretz Yisrael to do concerts, because he wanted to pay back the creditors. That's how frum he was. Look at a Jew. This is a world's chazan and a vocalist, and even by the Goyim Lahav at the time. You take a look at where he performed. It wasn't only in synagogues, right? And Nebuch, he lost all his money, and he owed money, so he went around raising money to the point where he came to Eretz Yisrael, and that's where he had his heart attack, and he died. Everyone knows, sadly, at age 53. It took a toll on him. There's a whole story, a very sad story, with great cantor Yossele Rosenblatt. Anyway, so this editor lost his job. The Frierdiker Rebbe in 40 heard about him, whatever, and hired him. But he wasn't really knowledgeable in Chasidus. And one of the ideas in the paper was to have a monthly Maamar Chasidus that the previous Rebbe wrote in Yiddish, and also to explain some basic Chabad Hasidic ideas in Yiddish that will build the Emunah, will strengthen the faith. So who was his teacher? The previous Rebbe and the Rebbe. And the story is that Bochrim saw this guy come, and he would go into 770, he would go upstairs, the Frierdiker Rebbe lived on the second floor, unannounced, and no one knew, no one ever saw this man, and never before, and who is he? And when they stopped him on his way out, he would not answer. He just walked out the door, back down to the train, to Penn Station, and he took the train back to New Haven. So one Bacher decided, that's it, I'm going to teach him a lesson. And he decided to follow him on the train. So he went on the train on the same car. And when he got out, he went to Penn Station, and he said to him, and he went on, I think, even to New Haven, to the Haven line. He followed him, and he said, I've caught you. And if you don't tell me who you are, I'm going to tell all the Bacherim in 770 that you are a spy or something, And I saw you coming in, and I saw you coming out. So that's when he told him that he was the editor of the Hakriya Vakdusha. So this person, I forget now his name. His name was Aaron Halevi Moose, which, by the way, he's the same author as the book, The Bible Unauthorized. Have you guys ever seen the Chabad publication book called The Bible Unauthorized? Yeah. In the 20s or 30s, the Bundes, the non-religious people, put out a book called The Unauthorized Bible. And they argued that many of the things in Bereshis are not true according to science. And their purpose was clearly to break the Emunah, Rahman Litzlan. So Moose put out a book with the Rebbe's guidance, our Rebbe, who was trained in Torah and in science, and it was called the Bible Unauthorized, just the opposite of the unauthorized Bible. And it's a very, very intellectual piece to argue, how to reconcile science and Torah. So his name was Moose. And Moose was a pen name. It wasn't his real name. So this same person was the editor of the newspaper, of the Hakriya Vakdusha. So this editor was hired, and in the first article where he starts explaining and talking and writing about Chasidus, he wrote something that sounded like he was belittling the simple meaning of a piece of Gemara, the way you way you need to understand Gemara. When the rabbinate of New York and all over got the new, because this was sent out, not just the Litvaks, but regular Orthodox rabbis and rabbonim, they flipped out. And they got very upset. And they wrote letters. And the letters were printed later in the next edition of the journal. I have it. And they said, how can you write about the Gemara that we are not to understand the Gemara literally? You're going against the Chazal, you're belittling, and this was kind of the first disagreement with the previous Rebbe that the establishment had in 1940-41. The Rebbe called Moose in, and there's a letter printed a few weeks after, and he said, I'm getting all these attacks. You have to write a disclaimer that, hey, I didn't say this to you, and you wrote it yourself based on your understanding, and that it was a mistake to write it this way, and you're going to clarify. And that's what he did. The damage was already done, but at least, there was a clarification. So why am I saying this? Because we have to be very careful when we talk about what I said before, the difference between Kabbalah and Chasidus. So I'm talking about Kabbalah and Chasidus. But even Kabbalah and Chasidus, if you don't explain these things to people, they could take it the wrong way. So obviously, as much as the short phrase that I used is kind of right to the point, but nevertheless, it's always helpful if you're talking to people that are not sensitive to these issues or not knowledgeable to add verbiage and explanation to the short phrase. So going back to the Maamar here, the Mayim El Yoinim, the upper waters, is Pnimius HaTorah. Then the Rebbe explained to us yesterday that Im B'chukoisha Telecho doesn't mean if, but rather halavai, wish. That Hashem says, I wish you follow in the ways of Torah, so you become a mahalich, and you really become someone who transcends limitations. You go out of the box, and you're not restrained by formality. And this is another very important thing, and now is maybe not the time to elaborate, but we have to break out. You got to break out. Every person, every day. If you feel that you're contained and locked in, you got to break out. Because it's not, and I don't mean become, cuckoo and crazy and wild and sugar, but I mean, whatever for you is difficult, you have to, and you feel confined, you have to break out. That's the notion, Moshe, of B'chol Moedecha. We've been talking about B'chol Moedecha. There's B'chol Levavcha, there's B'chol Nafshecha, U'B'chol Moedecha, right? With all your might, with all your heart, with all your soul, all your heart, you have two, right? Levavcha. It's not B'chol Lipcha. The Gemara says, it should have said B'chol Lipcha with one base. Why does it say B'chol Levavcha with two bases? Because there's a Yetzer Tov and a Yetzer Hara. So the love coming from the position of B'chol Levavcha is an argumentation. You versus me. Now, everyone knows that the love that comes from that position ain't a great love, because there's an argumentation. The second love, B'chol Nafshecha, with all the soul, it's more refined, there's no more argumentation. But remember what I taught you yesterday? There's three things. Argumentation, subjugation. Did I tell this to you? I told this to someone else. I think, Avi, you'll like this. B'chol Avavcha is argumentation. What? I said it to you guys? B'chol Avavcha, no. Okay, so B'chol Avavcha is argumentation, a love coming from an argument. B'chol Nafshecha is a love coming from subjugation. I subjugate the Yetzer Hara. And B'chol Ma'otcha is a love coming from transformation. Argumentation, subjugation, and transformation. The quality of the B'chol Ma'otcha love compared to even the B'chol Nafshecha is an Adam Finitum. They're in a different category. Because when you subjugate something, you still have the issue that will come back to haunt you. When you transform it, you've now made it into your you've made, as it says in Chasidus, an oyev, aleph vav yud vez, which means your enemy. An oyev, you've made from an oyev a oyev, aleph vav hey vez. You've made from an enemy a lover. To make from an enemy a lover is the greatest accomplishment. And that's what we call transformation, which is the avodah of bechol mi'odecha. So the Rebbe says, this is accomplished when we take the nefesh abamis and we use it for Hashem. Let's go now to the bottom of 286. We are at the words